Heal Me by Embracing Cedric on AO3.
Chapter 8. This exercise is a bit like Capture the Flag, except everyone will be going after the same target, placed somewhere in the building in the middle of the map. First to find the target and return to the established base wins. You're going to be in teams of 2. Aizawa directed the class's attention once they had assembled to the list of names divided into teams on one of the monitor screens. First fight will be Team A and B, Bakugou and Shinso versus Kaminari and Kirishima. Hey, maybe Bakugou will be distracted with his boyfriend here? Kaminari teased as the 4 boys prepared to leave and take their positions on the field. You're kidding me? You're all screwed. The class watched as a sadistic grin split Bakugou's face, a familiar fire enlightening in his eyes as Midoriya began to smile. I do some of my best fighting when I'm trying to impress Izuku. The exercise was eventful. Aizawa noted plenty of areas where his students were making errors. New mistakes were fine. They were part of the process, and a new mistake could be readily addressed. Old mistakes only meant that the students hadn't learned much since the last time they've made it. However, there was a net improvement that had seemed to be adapting at a rate that even Aizawa had to commend for such young individuals. He was pleasantly surprised to see Shinso and Bakugou working together as a team more seamlessly than he had ever seen them before. He usually tried to pair Bakugou with students he wasn't competitive with, Shinso being one of the worst. But something had changed. Rather than yelling and spitting off to do their own things, they appeared to be actually diversing strategies and accusing them together. Aizawa wondered where this shift had come from, but had a strange feeling that it had something to do with the arrival of a green-haired healer who subsequently furiously scribbled in his notebook beside him. When the exercise ended, Bakugou and Shinso emerged as victors. Midoriya moved to heal any grievous injuries that had been sustained during the battle. Kirishima and Kaminari were the extent scrapes and burns that were occupied hazardous of being too close to Bakugou's explosion. Shinso had a few scrapes as well, some surface from accidental misuse of his capture weapon, and others from Kirishima's hard blows. Bakugou sustained very little damage, though he still admittedly waived any attempts of Midoriya to heal his injuries. Normally, this is the part where I point out the glaring mistakes you're all sure making despite your second years. Aizawa said, his students were heard. However, I'm curious what Midoriya has to say about your performance. He turned to look at the boy, who seemed not quite as steady on his feet after healing so much. At some point, he had required another bag of sweets, likely from the pocket of his lab coat. Bakugou seemed tense when he stood with his eyes glued on the healer, like he was ready to swoop in and grab Midoriya should the green-haired boy actually collapse. As Aizawa thought about it, it made much more sense why Bakugou had refused to be healed. He wondered if Bakugou ever considered to being healed by Midoriya, if doing so meant exhaustion and scars for the other. Really? Midoriya questioned, glancing up from the bag of chocolates, one of the candies already in his mouth. His healing recovery period seemed quick, especially when supplemented with food. He already looked nearly as energetic as before. Nezu said you're a skilled strategist in quick analysis, and I saw you taking notes during the battle, Aizawa told him. I'd like a fresh opinion. Oh, thank God, Kaminari murmured it with relief. Midoriya should be less harsh compared to Aizawa. That's where you're wrong, Bakugou murmured, a tired smile settling on his face as he watched his boyfriend, extremely relieved, his notebook and flipped through its pages. Kirishima gave him a questioning look, wondering how Midoriya's analysis could possibly be any worse than unforgiving reviews from their teacher. What do you mean, Kirishima? Yes, sir. Kirishima spun back to face Midoriya as the healer full called. He went gridded with his back straight and arms to his side, the pose of a soldier who had been addressed by a commanding officer. Your quirk is impressive, and your determination is remarkable, Midoriya told him, eyes scanning the pages with notes. Kirishima gave him a confused smile, relaxing slightly with his perfect posture. He glanced at Bakugou and chuckled slightly, as if deciding his classmate's cryptical warning about Midoriya had been only a joke. Thank you. I feel your capacity to consider alternative plans of attack is borderline non existent. Kirishima blinked, staring back wordlessly at the stern expression Midoriya was now giving him. His green eyes seemed colder than before, more critical. Aizawa recognized the face well and had seen plenty of it during his own time as a student. He had the perfect look of himself over the years. It was a sharp glaze of a teacher who couldn't afford to let soft emotions weaken the advice they'd had for a student, so they delivered their words with a cold neutrality. Aizawa was impressed Midoriya had managed to manifest such a expression so young. Told you, Bakugou murmured, the corners of his mouth pulling into a smug grin that made it clear that the blunt surbrigly coming from his boyfriend was far more from a surprise for him. Your magna seems to be brute force, and I don't deny that your particular brand of force is quite effective, based on what I heard in your involvement in the Hakashi raid, Midoriya continued on. However, if all your appointment needs to do is to wear you down into your energy and subsequently your quirk gives out, then you really need to get into the habit of strategizing attacks that don't waste the energy. Oh, Shinzo, Midoriya called, shifting slightly to face the student in question. Oh god, me next. Shinzo drawled with a laughing smile. I've told you before that your quirk holds a lot of potential, and I could tell you've been working on utilizing it beautifully. Midoriya told him, flipping once again through his pages of his notebook. Though, as I'm sure you're already aware, your combat skills still need work, and that blinding cough of yours may provide to be a hindrance rather than an advantage. I understand it takes a while to master using a capture weapon like that, and it should be said that you've displayed a remarkable degree of control for how long you've been learning. Aizawa sensed a smile at hearing praises given to his mentor's hard work. It had taken him years to master the same weapon, and he knew Shinzo was often frustrated with what he had perceived to be slow progress. I'm hearing too many compliments, Shinzo pointed out, a teasing grin on his face. I sense an insult coming up. It's not an insult, Midoriya corrected, a matching grin beginning to creep on his face. I was going to say, if you're going to keep hurting yourself with that, then I suggest you also learn how to fight reliably without it. Or at least begin to incorporate other support gear that you can rely on more confidently. He paused for a moment, huffing out a laugh before continuing. Also, I'll probably stop healing you if you keep coming to me with injuries caused by your own support item. Got it, Doc, Shinzo promised, with a lazy mock two-finger snap. Kaminari, please be gentle, Kaminari begged, bracing as if he were to be hit. Midoriya's demeanor seemed to soften even further. I've heard that you're prone to shortcutting, so congrats on not doing that here, Midoriya told him, with a small but encouraging smile. Don't hesitate so much. I could tell you had a strategy, and you let it get diverted just because you didn't want to tell your partner what to do. You did? Kirishima questioned, turning to his partner with a look of shock. It wasn't that great, Kaminari argued, rubbing a hand against his neck as he felt the attention of the class shift to him. Based on what I saw you trying to do in the beginning, it was good, Midoriya maintained, pointing out some of his notes that was likely had observed evidence of the strategy. You two could have tried or maybe even won the match if you've been more assertive. It takes an intelligent mind to work around the drawbacks of your quirk. Don't discredit that ingenuity. Kaminari blinked, a soft blush beginning to overtake his cheeks. Thank you, I think. And finally, Midoriya grinned, a challenging in his eyes as he shut his notebook and used it lightly to tap on Bakugou's nose. You already know what you did wrong, Kachan. Nothing, Bakugou answered with a confident smile. Wrong answer, Midoriya countered, his grin wavering. Bakugou's own smirk fell as he clicked the top of his tongue to the side. I know, he concerned. Aizawa knew that while Bakugou still made mistakes and struggled with certain aspects of training like cooperation, he was very confident when it came to understanding his own quirk. That, combined with being in a relationship with a quirk analysis who wasn't afraid to speak his mind, likely meant that he'd already pointed what he could have done better or differently. Despite his rival pride, he'd still be able to recognize where improvements could have made due to his performance tendencies. Everyone get ready to observe the next team, Aizawa ordered. Team C and D, take your positions. The students wandered away, either to enter the ground or to observe the monitor screens. He could hear many of them whispering either with excitement or dread about Midoriya's battle analysis, and they hoped he'd say about their own performances when the time came. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Midoriya and Bakugou were still standing together, apart from the class. Midoriya seemed to be fussing over something. He watched as the healer lifted a hand and snapped his finger over Bakugou's ear, resulting in the blonde reacting to snatch Midoriya's wrist, a scowl on his face. "Your ears are ringing again," he heard Midoriya say, less of a question and more as an assessment. "Aren't they?" "Stop that, I'm fine," Bakugou murmured in response as he glanced away to avoid the other's worried gaze. "You can't lie to me." Midoriya gently tugged his hand away and used to grip Bakugou's chin and guide his face back towards him. "Nor should you." At this point, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Shinso, who had all been near, began to hang back rather than joining the rest of the class. Kirishima's brows furrowed as he watched the exchange and saw the comfort on Bakugou's face. "Is something wrong?" Kirishima asked, taking a step back towards them with a hand outstretched to lend an aid. "Is Bakugou injured?" "I saw you take a hit, dude," Kaminari noted, also wondering what the issue was. "I'm fine now. Fuck off," Bakugou snarled, tearing himself away from Midoriya's hold and stomping away a few feet from everyone. Kirishima looked at Midoriya, his gaze questioning and worried, but the healer only sighed and shook his head. Kirishima seemed to get the message and moved to join the rest of the class, pulling a curious Kaminari along the way. Shinso lingered like he wanted to press his luck, but a look of warning from Midoriya eventually sent him with the others. Aizawa watched the students go grouped together across the room and glanced at the monitors to see Team C and D still preparing for the match. He made his way over to Midoriya, who was now hovering over Bakugou, the two of them conversing, with hushed yet frustrated words. "What's going on?" Aizawa questioned. Voice kept low to avoid drawing the attention of the rest of the class. "It's just a stupid ringing in my ears," Bakugou argued, looking even more irritated to see that his teacher has now gotten involved. "Tends to happen when my explosions get too loud." "Tetanus?" Aizawa submissed, when Midoriya and Bakugou both sent him matching curious looks. Slightly questioning how he was familiar with the condition, he sighed and began to explain. "President Mike suffers from it. He wears protective gear, but sometimes even that's not enough to handle his quirk." Aizawa quickly glances over to Bakugou's costume, suddenly recognizing a glaring issue with it. "Why don't you have any protection like a noise filter? If you let it go unchecked, you could sustain serious permanent damage." "Oh look, it's the same thing I've been telling you for years," Midoriya murmured, his smug words undercut by the lingering worry in his expression. "Great, now there's two of you." Bakugou sarcastically bit back, leaning back at his heel, as if a bit distance he could move away from his teacher and his boyfriend would improve the situation. "I'll stop nagging you about it when you start wearing the support gear that I've designed for you." Midoriya hooked his fingers on the material of Bakugou's costume and pulled his boyfriend back towards him. "I don't want some stupid piece of junk in my ears messing with my perception," Bakugou shouted, causing a few more curious classmates to glance over until a warning glare from Aizawa made them look away. "Bakugou, watch your language. They don't fuck with it. It'll improve it," Midoriya snapped, abandoning any presence of a clean argument. "I've even made the design match your hero costume." The two of them were inches away from one another, well into each other's personal space to a degree that could have easily whispered their arguments and that they would have heard them. When the distance began to escalate, Aizawa was on guard, but not too worried. Seeing any other student yelling in Bakugou's face was a valid cause for concern, but this was Midoriya. Aizawa wanted to believe that Bakugou wouldn't start throwing punches at his boyfriend over a simple spat, and that the fairly tempered boy would calm down with much ease than he normally did. His assumptions were correct when he saw Bakugou fuming one moment and began to smile the next, a toothy snarl slowly morphing into a teasing grin as he pulled up and gently covered the hand that Midoriya had twisted into the material of his tank top. Midoriya became less adjacent, his irritation seeming to only grow as he watched his boyfriend's demeanor suddenly change. "You're such a nerd," Bakugou murmured, voice fond, in a small smile. Midoriya blushed, a deep scarlet, and pushed away a now laughing Bakugou. "What was that?" Midoriya asked, a taunting grin. Now his face was well as he raised his hands to cover both his ears. "Sorry, I can't hear you. I guess I'm just gonna need to find another way to insult me." At first, Midoriya's words left Aizawa confused, as he glanced between the two students. However, the challenge soon made more sense as he watched Bakugou raise his hand to quickly sign the same insult he had just spoken along with a few other colorful comments tackled on top. Rather than look offended, Midoriya simply looked pleased, responding to Bakugou's sign with a soft smile. Bakugou pinched the other's cheek before walking away to join the rest of the class, who greeted him with compliments for winning the match and noisy questions over what they've been yelling about. He's learning how to sign as well? Aizawa noted as he watched the student walk off. Midoriya sat down, adjusted some of the cameras so they could focus on the two near teams on the field, waiting to start. Like you said, he's at risk for permanent damage, Midoriya replied. You already made me promise that I won't try to heal it. Support gear will help, but you should always have a plan for when things don't work out. Plan for when things don't work out. Aizawa understood that lesson well, and for the reason he and his husband were also very well versed in sign language to prepare for the day when it was truly needed. It was a tough reality to swallow, the idea that one of your major senses could be utterly lost. He had faced such a fear a few times himself over the years. Occasionally, a villain would come along who was clever enough to realize that if his quirk was dependent on eyes, then the simple fix will be to, well, take away the eyes. Aizawa once took a seat beside Midoriya and checked the cameras to make sure his students were in position. Out of one of the corners of his eyes, he saw Midoriya with his notebook back out, pen pressed to a fresh page as his sharp, green eyes focused on the monitor screens. Aizawa pressed the buttons for the microphone. Team C and D are ready, Aizawa commanded. Begin. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is Midoriya and how he gives out his analysis, right? I love this. I love the whole tough love. It's why I love Aizawa's character as well and the way he teaches and his teaching style. And I love how Midoriya kind of mimics that in a way, kind of, because, yeah, they want to be pro-heroes. That is a life-threatening job. Sugarcoating an analysis or a critique can mean the difference between life or death. And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you do have to call someone out and be like, hey, that thing you did was really bad and you should never do it again, right? And it might hurt the person at the time, but you know what? It's better to hurt them right now a little bit than to see them dead later on, you know, for that mistake, you know? And I love that. I just love that. That's why I love Aizawa's teaching style so much. He might be harsh, he might be like a little bit tough, but you know, it's tough love. Literally, being expelled is the equivalent of getting killed, right? And it's the harsh reality that he's trying to make his students aware because when he was a teen, he unfortunately had to face that tough reality when his friend died. Bakugou and Midoriya having this little argument and then immediately calming down and just, you know, not lashing out at each other and understanding why the other is saying, like Midoriya understanding that it's hard for Bakugou because losing a sense is very hard and it's very difficult and very much he could be in the process of like trying to like process, you know? And Bakugou understanding, yeah, he's my boyfriend and he's worried about me because he should be worried. I'm literally, you know, in danger of losing a sense. And like understanding, like it's never outright said, but you just know that in that moment they've processed and they know that the other is feeling something else, which that is a healthy way for a relationship, to understand the other's emotions and why they're being like that, while at the same time knowing that, hey, maybe I'm also doing something and I need to calm down, and during arguments to calm down and like actually talk about it instead of just screaming at each other, because screaming is not going to get you anywhere. So I love that. It's such a cute little moment that I love so much. Another cute little moment, Eraserhead married to Present Mike. Oh my god, they're like my favorite ship. Like, of all time, favorite ships, it has to be them. Like, they top every other book I've ever read, every other, like, fandom I've ever been in. Like, they're my OTP. They're my ultimate OTP, you know, like, of all time. Like, all stars. But yeah. Anyways, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, have a wonderful day or night. Join our community server, link is in the description. What the fuck was that? Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna leave that in. You guys deserve Yeah, you deserve to see that.